Ujambo, good evening, buenas noches. This is a message to my Republican friends, my African loved ones, and African descents. We're in some shattered waters and critical times. For all African descents all over the planet and spread abroad. But it's something very, very critical I want you to know as my people, including America. Now I understand I am not the leader of the African Americans, respectfully. But you must admit, whether you are inclusive or not in our mother continent, Africa, that you are a descent of our land. So I say this to you as well as I say this to my African people. There's some critical things you must know at this present time. And first I will start by saying, why the Republicans? I want you to know that I am not a Republican. I am not an independent. And of course, I'm definitely not a Democrat. But what I can say and guarantee you, as long as you are in America and you are conducting business in America, you should give high respect to the Republicans. Let me tell you why. First off, I think the Black Americans, and often sometimes I think the Caucasian Americans, have forgot that they took a pledge when they were in school. And the Americans stated, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, not to democracy, to the republic, not to independency, but to the republic for which it stands. Unfortunately, I feel like my Black American peers have forgotten that pledge. But yet, though you have forgotten that pledge, you must be accountable for the promise that you took upon that oath. I also want you to know, as an African, what I'm about to state affects us all over the world, but especially in America, and especially in Africa and in South Africa. If your identification has your name in all capital letters, then you must understand, regardless of what you want or what you consider, your king is the Pope. By default, by law, this is not Rocki's suggestion, this is not Rocki's opinion, this is the law. The Pope is your king and your highest authority. So within that, you have to understand the separation. When you're under the Pope's crown, your name is in capital letters in a capitalist society pertaining capitalism. So it's about capital when you're pertaining to America and anything pertaining to business and commerce. We as Africans need to understand that. Africans spread it abroad. Every African that's in Africa that's trying to figure out why we can't exploit in our own land that we was birthed from, as well as the Black Americans that's African descent, why today after 450 years of enslavement, they still do not consider the thoughts or conceal human rights. Commercial rights are a strong possibility, but not human rights. Let me give you just a brief summary of history. We came over here on a boat or ship. Never forget that. And usually, every ship in today's present time is named after a feminine woman or a feminine entity. And today, we do exports and imports with ships, and usually they're named after feminine entities. Consequently, what was applied to every African descent and Black American is the same enslaved process. Please, have an open mind and do the comparisons if you will. A boat named after a woman, then we have a sister from the motherland. That boat or ship conceals and carry goods. That woman can deliver a child, which is very good. Once that boat or ship comes to the land, it arrives at a dock. Once that beautiful mother, it's time to deliver that child who was so good, she go to the hospital, to the dock. I'm hoping you're seeing the comparison, because this is very necessary all over the world, as long as we're doing trading and as long as we are producing children. You need to understand, every continent has a different law of the land. The law of the land for America may be different for Africa. Africa may be different from China, law of the land, and then the law of the land of Russia may be different from Europe. But there's one law that overpowers all of them, and there's one law that equates all of them to an equivalent measurement. And that's law of the water. We like to call maritime law of the high seas. This law makes sure whichever law of the land that's applied to each country, in order for us to import and export goods, that we must have an equivalent law of the water. And when you're pertaining with law of the water, you're pertaining with money and commerce and business. This is something your conscious community leaders will not tell you. Why? Probably because they do not want to hold the ship or the mother held accountable and responsible. And how do we find these statements to be true? Well, like I say, don't take my word for it. Understand, read, comprehend the law. Let's take another example for our people spread abroad. We have some people, more performantly, Black Americans, that say they own homes. Okay. They have to pay mortgage. When you own, my African people will elaborate. When you own, you don't have to continue paying. When you own it, and that's it. But in America, to the African descents, they say you own, you have to pay a mortgage. What is the prefix of mortgage? Mort. And by lawful definition, what is that? Obsolete death. When we're dealing with business and corporations. What is the prefix of corporations? Corpse. And what are we dealing with? With the prefix of corporation, corpse? Death. A dead body. So what does all of this have in common? What this have in common is something that we need more of. Ownership. 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 But you have to understand that this English language that they applied on us, applied a different magic sorcery upon us, because this is not our original language and not our original tongue. When we're abiding laws and rules by somebody else's tongue, that means we are restricted by somebody else's power and rules. You must understand that, my African descent people. We're spread abroad, and we're kept abroad because of a difference of language, culture, continental, and melanin measurement of who we are. I think I want to repeat that one more time, that last statement. Melanin measurement of who we are. And why is that important? Because we come from a mother continent very valuable. There are even Caucasians from South Africa who don't look like you and I. They have no problem leaving Africa and saying we come from that beautiful continent, though they do not look like us or the original people. But you know what beauty comes from our continent? The people, the resources, the wealth, the animals, the culture, our history. That's what comes from us. That even people with less melanin, done through crimes, is born here, will want claims of our mother continent. So I really need you to understand, whether you're an African in Africa, an Africa in Europe, an African in China, an African in South America, an African in America, I need you to understand the wealthness and the richness of our mother continent and the blood going through your veins. But you must know who you are. And speaking of who you are, that conceals a lot with ownership. Ownership. Ownership is very important. It's not just important that you own, it's how you own it, how you conceal it, not possess it, but own it. Few factors, I believe, stops us African descents from owning things to our fullest capacity. Factor number one, you got to know who you are. If you don't know who you are, how can you possess anything truly to its fullest capacity? For an example, if there is a military base anywhere in Africa from a foreign source, how do you identify that military base to be a foreign source? You identify it by its flag and banner. So let's say if an African American goes to Africa and buys land and property, you know why that would not be good for the interest of the mother continent. Nothing offensive to the black American, but for the outcome of he or she and the mother continent, that would not be great. Because being that they're still an American, they're a product of an American, that means whatever they purchase has now become also a product of America. So if a black American buys property, or a black Islam from America buys property in Africa, then they're helping expand the colonization of Islam as well as America. And for America, that would be a great benefit if their economy ever falls. For Africa and the individual who thought they owned it, but they really just possessed it, that will not be productive at all. So once again, it wouldn't be no offense towards the black American, but once you attach black, once you attach American, once you attach European, or once you attach anything that pertains to the identity or culture of an outside foreign culture or ethnicity, you're helping expand their colonization. But, for an example, me, a Nubian, if I buy a property in Zimbabwe as a Nubian, and I build the construct properly with the right fencing, the right gating, and the proper flags and banner, that property now that I purchased within that perimeter is now Nubian property. So that's something we must apply wherever we go, whether it's in the mother continent or whether it's just random property at all. You have to understand when you're buying things for ownership, do you own it under your nationality and your ethnicity, or do you possess it because another foreign culture still possesses you? The second thing when it comes to ownership for us Africans, we must stay away from debt. Debt can stop and slow us down from owning things at that moment and for future ownerships. We have in debt, 2 words, and we have indebted, 1 word. When you're in debt, you have to pay a party or facility or government a currency or cash back. When you're indebted, your future payments is subtracted based upon contracts. And it also stops our sovereignty. Our fullest capacity of sovereignty cannot blossom if another country has us in debt, or if another country's government has us in debt. So indebtment by paying future payments back with any currency, and indebted because of contracts. And 3, another strong factor that holds us back from ownership is identifying who we are beyond our very first contract. Now this statement here is lawful. This is not my opinion. And the mothers must take more accountability. It's very shameful to see black women talk down upon black men, and that black man's resources was cut short because of another black woman contracted him. What I'm saying is not only true and factual, but the Republicans can confirm this. But it was a business move that should have been guided by the father if the father was there. But it's not the father's fault, and it's not the white man's fault. The mothers have to take accountability for contracting their child, son or daughter, to the state and to the federal. That's contract number 1. So everything else after that contract automatically puts you in the hole without you not even knowing it. Because everything you could have built can always be repossessed when you only possess it if you're under that contract. And this is another reason why you must be properly educated and the Republicans need to be in a position to educate the people of what's really going on. This issue affects every African descent all over the continent of Africa, all over Europe, and etc. But consequently, it affects the black Americans the most. Because when you're black, that is the lowest commercial identity. Do not confuse what I just said. Commercial identity has nothing to do with the individual. I will never say black Americans have no talent. They are very talented. They have done and accomplished great things. But the fullest capacity of the things that they have done cannot blossom if they're under a contract to be a black item. Even when great superstars have a great career, they pass away and the government or other companies own their material, own their music, own their rights. Because while they was alive, they was working for a dead entity of a corporation. This is not my opinion, this is law. By definition, a person, according to the dictionary of law, is a corporation or an organization. So ownership must be done as a proper person. Something we all must apply, but especially the black Americans. Because there's a possibility that everything they built can be contracted as a black individual. So if this economy ever falls, and the Republicans do not keep this economy afloat, the reinsurance of what they need to keep this economy going will be dependent on everything every black American has ever bought. They need to understand law and how it works and identity before they take any contract, any check, or any form of currencies. Your sovereignty cannot blossom while you're under this birth certificate contract. And this is something the Republicans have educated me about, and so have other global leaders. So this is not a diss to none of our people. This is a warning, like I said before. We are in charted waters. And the only way to overpower these waters in the water system is to understand the system that we're in, that was placed upon us since colonization. You don't own nothing if you don't properly own your body. And if you don't properly own your body, you do not properly have proper identification to own anything. You can possess it, but not own it. I will conclude this message, and I hope it was very beneficial for whoever's seen it. Maybe more information will come from me and the Nubian people. I will conclude this by saying, Asante, buenas tardes, and enjoy the rest of your day. I am Rocki Raziq from the nation and the country Nubia.